Welcome everybody to another episode of the Talking with Heroes talk show program. I am Bob Calvert, the founder of Talking with Heroes, and your host for this program. And TalkingWithHeroes.com is our website, and thank you for your service.us. For those of you who have been watching the recent programs with USAA at their TV studio here in San Antonio, and line1.org, also in San Antonio, we are now with another organization, another member of the R4Alliance.org called Triip. www.vettrip.org. It's TRIIP.org. They are an organization helping with stress, resilience, and relaxation training. They have the Veterans Team Recovery Integrative Immersion Process, which they call Triip. And so we're going to be talking with a number of the men and women who are here at one of these retreats, I guess you might call it, right? Mm-hmm. And right now we're here with retired Army Colonel John Cook, 40 years of service to our country. First of all, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And tell people a little bit about yourself. Go back. Obviously, you were in 40 years. Mm-hmm. What motivated you to become part of the military? And then talk a little bit about your career in the military.
Okay. Well, I graduated from high school in 1973, and that just happened to be the year that the United States went from a draft to an all-volunteer army. And I was one of the first kids, I guess, I was a teenager, that signed up for it. The reason I joined is because there were a lot of prospects for someone who was graduating from a very small high school in Missouri. And also my parents were poor, I don't know how else to say it, and there were 7 children in the family. My twin brother and I were the oldest, so I just sought the Army because that's what I always wanted to do, and I also wanted to get out of there. I remember when I passed the test, and the recruiter says, okay, you can pretty much be what you want to be, and that was the term back then, be all you can be. And so I signed up to be a military policeman, and I asked him to get me as far away from Missouri as he could, and he goes, well, I can send you to Vietnam. And I said, can I have a second choice? And he goes, sure. So I ended up, after my advanced individual training, going to Heidelberg, Germany. And there I served for 4 years as a military policeman. And then I did another tour of duty after that. I re-enlisted for Presidio San Francisco, which was great. I got out after that time and joined ROTC at UC Berkeley and finished my bachelor's degree and came back on active duty in 1983 as a Medical Service Corps officer. I was selected to go to flight school, so in 1984 I went to flight school. Graduated a year later, was one of a couple guys that got picked in 1985 to go right into the Black Hawk transition. I did that, and then I was sent to Panama for my first flying assignment. I did that, flew all over Central South America, found that was a great place to learn how to fly this new aircraft, the Black Hawk. I did 3 years there, and then came back and went through about a year's full of training, and then became an instructor at Fort Sam Houston, or Joint Base San Antonio now. I did that for 3 years, and during that span of time I was, because they needed my skill as a pilot, I flew during Desert Storm with a unit out of Germany, which I would later come back and command one of the units. But anyway, so I came back from Desert Storm, I did another year, and then they sent me to Baylor University to get a master's degree in healthcare. And then I did my residency back in Heidelberg. That's where I was as a private, as an MP, and so it was wonderful, and that's actually where I met my wife, who also worked at the hospital as a German working for the American government in the hospital. So I did that for 3 years, and then I was selected to be an aviation commander. I went to Katterbach, Germany, close to Nuremberg, and served for 28 months as an aviation medevac commander and flew missions all over Europe and deployed the unit to the Balkans for several months and did that. Then went up after that assignment to Wiesbaden, Germany, to be the executive officer of the aviation unit. And from there I was selected to go to Washington, D.C., where I was the assignments officer for about 1,000 medical service corps officers around the world. After that I was selected to go to command. My wife and I went to Las Vegas, Nevada, if you can believe it. And I was a recruiting commander, but only for healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, and the such. And I had the battle space, as we call it, about half of the United States, to include Korea, Hawaii, Guam, Alaska. So that was exciting, but it was a lot of work. After that, my wife and I were fortunate enough to be stationed in Hawaii for 2 years. And then I was selected to attend the War College, which in the medical side of the house is a big deal because it's only 1% that gets selected. I went to the Industrial College of the Armed Forces in Washington, D.C., graduated a year later, and then took a brigade command. I had the Army's largest training brigade here at Fort Sam Houston, for all combat medics and officer trainings. Combat medics, a lot of people don't know that it's the second largest MOS after infantry in the Army. After I did that for 2 years, the commanding general asked me to be the chief of staff for him and for Fort Sam Houston. So I did that for a year, and then I was selected to command the hospital at Fort Campbell with the great 101st Airborne Division. So I went there and worked for a truly great leader, John Campbell, who went on to be the vice chief of staff of the Army, and he commanded the forces in Afghanistan. Once I finished with that, my commanding general asked me of the Corps if I would be the deputy commander of the Medical Service Corps. Came back to Fort Sam Houston and did that. I guess the only thing I left out is when I transitioned from enlisted to going to college, the day that I signed out of the Army active duty, I signed into the active reserves with an infantry division for 3 years in the Bay Area. So I never had a break in active service. And the only reason I left on October 31st, Halloween, in 2013, was I had the proverbial government bayonet in my back saying I was out of time. I couldn't spend any more time in. So I've worked hard the last 3 years, and the first year was tough for me, but I've worked hard the last 3 years with the help of my wonderful wife, and have made a great transition into this thing called retirement.
So, first of all, again, thank you for your service. I guess that from the smiles I'm seeing over here, your wife's sitting right over here, right?
Yes.
Okay. Good guess on my part. And the German accent. So, real briefly, if you don't mind, because I want to ask you about that trip too. Talk about family in the military, because we've had a number of people we've talked to at USAA where they're talking about what it was like for their children, for the spouse, and especially with all the moves in the military and all that.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I will say, my long experience in the Army is that, I would assume it's the same with everyone, but everything is so much more dramatic in the military because every 2 to 3 years you're going to leave. Your family's going to pull up roots and move. And the other big piece of that is several times during your career, depending on how long you stay in, you're going to deploy. And that has a huge effect on your family, period. I can tell you, I had the privilege of commanding 4 different times as a field grade officer, and regardless, we were flying helicopters in combat zones and all that, but at the forefront of what was always going on were the soldiers and people's families. And so if we did not help, if we didn't understand that as leaders, if we didn't connect with that with our own families, then it was very difficult to actually accomplish these missions. And we obviously weren't sitting at a typewriter, so the mission, you had to have your head in the game, always. And if things weren't okay at home, uh, it wasn't going to go as well as it should. And so I have seen in my 40 years a movement of the Army from where you came in and you were a soldier and they didn't issue you a wife or a family to the realization that they are the centerpiece. And if they don't get briefed on the mission and you're not communicating with your family, then the chances of you making it through a full career and being as productive as you could be, it went down exponentially. And I think the Army's done a really great job with that. That's the only way that we can retain. We don't just retain soldiers today. We have to retain the family, or it's just not going to work.
Okay, I appreciate that. As most people watching, they've been watching maybe previous videos, they know that we've been talking with a lot of military support groups, recreational wellness groups, many of them started by veterans themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what brought you to VetTrip, and what's been your experience?
Well, I actually came to VetTrip a couple months ago by the recommendation of one of my healthcare providers. I had never heard of it. But she asked me if I was willing to try some alternative health care, and I said absolutely. I mean, my wife is about as holistic as they come, so she was like, yes, I don't care if you do anything else, but you're going to go to this. So I came with a very open mind. I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be or about, but I can tell you, based on the personalities of the people that greeted you from day one, and talking you through the process, and really, physically, emotionally, and spiritually putting their arms around you at a level that you just will not get in the sterile environment of a hospital. I've only been here twice, and it has made an incredible impression on me, both physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
So talk about what your experiences have been as far as coming through this and knowing that you're feeling better, and
Yeah.
what was the techniques that you benefited from?
Well, first of all, when I was in Bosnia, which I had mentioned earlier, I had gotten bit by a tick, and make a long story short, four different doctors looked at it because I started having neurological problems, and this was in the late 90s. They found out it was a tick. They put me on antibiotics. Well, after I retired in 2013, a couple of years later, I started to have real problems with my joints, and never anything that painful. And there was just nothing that I could do for it, and I refused to take pain medications because I had a twin brother who died last year, and his death really was attributed directly to oxycodone and pain medication. So I'm very weary of that. So when I came here, the hope is that I would learn some skills or receive some sort of provision that would allow me to lessen the pain. And I can tell you that I don't understand it all, but it is a combination of holistic healthcare, and most of it goes back thousands of years. For instance, acupuncture, and we know that massage therapy, aromatherapy, a lot of these different techniques. And the thing is amazing is they basically introduced you and your body to all of these at one time. And the session lasted, I guess, about 2 hours because I almost lost a sense of time. And there was also the music. And I'm going to tell you, I have received a lot of health care in my life, but up to this point in time, this, as crazy as it sounds, this is probably the most productive and results-driven medical care that I've received. And a big part of that, which was, it almost didn't seem real, that the passion that the providers, the kindness that everyone showed you in introducing you into this process, the sincerity in which this product is delivered, has not only made an impression upon my mind, which is part of of the healing cycle, but certainly upon my body. When I came here over a month ago, I was having a hard time walking, and it was very painful to stand. And like I said, I've suffered a lot of pain in 40 years. I'm airborne, air assault, commando, French command, all that stuff. But this was the first time in my life when I really felt a truly enveloped in the healing process. You know, do my joints still hurt? Yes, they do. But I am walking now with a lot less pain, and probably more importantly, is it's made me realize that there are other avenues to healing, and so from that perspective, you know, I've started to look at different avenues of approach. I'm taking a couple natural medications now that I would have never thought before of taking, and my only response has been, where has this been? You know, and I know you know, having worked in healthcare a little bit, that you have to balance who's running the industry, all the pharmaceuticals and all that, with, you know, concepts of healthcare that have been around for thousands of years. Acupuncture, I have never experienced that until here. But talking to someone, I was like, you know, it's been around for 5,000 years for a reason. And one of those reasons is it's got to work at some level.
Right.
And so I don't really question a lot of this. I just know that when you come in and they ask you what your pain level is and it's high, and 2 hours later you leave and it's almost zero, no one is going to tell me that something in there doesn't work.
Exactly. So you'll be continuing to come back, or is it something you can do again, or?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am thrilled that I get this opportunity. I am truly appreciative, and I'm going to tell you, I will come back as long as they allow me to, because, you know, I get some health care here from them, and I get it here, but what this has allowed me is in between to educate myself and take better care of myself, and to use some of the techniques that they teach you here, because it's not just providing health care, they're also teaching you how to better care for yourself.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing all this. I really appreciate it, and I know the people watching right now will appreciate it too. With your 40 years of experience in the military, including running a hospital and everything you've done, to come to here and find like you said, alternative methods that probably should have been told us. We should be knowing about it anyway.
Well,
right?
thank you. And the only thing that I would tell the audience out there is, you know, we get raised in a certain way to think a certain way, and that's all good. And the healthcare in our country is second to none. But let's all remember that, and we are kind of heading back there, there are alternatives. And all you got to do is explore them. I mean, just common sense should tell all of us that 1,000 years, 500 years ago, 200 years ago, there were a lot of remedies that people were that were healing them, and a lot of that is just being rediscovered in our society today. And I can tell you, vet trips, that is that piece of the puzzle that, at least at this point in my life, I was looking for. And I really appreciate the fact that they are there, and they are there in a loving way to support the soldiers.
I appreciate that. I'm glad you're able to be here and benefit like this. It's very encouraging to hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, before we go, if you could just kind of look at the camera, and you know we have a lot of soldiers. Numbers seem to be growing again, deployed in different parts of the world, many in harm's way. Why don't you give a shout out, a message to them?
Okay. I just want to say to all the soldiers that are stationed around the world, you know the old saying, been there, done that. I know where you are. I know what you're doing. I know the sacrifices that you are providing to this country. And I also know that you're doing it for the person to your left and your right. So I'm asking you, take care of yourself. Take care of the people on your left and right, and take care of your family. because while you're serving us, it's important that you take care of yourself and set that as a leadership example for everyone. But again, thank you for everything that you do.
Great, thank you. Well, folks, you've been hearing this on TalkingWithHeroes.com, and just like the previous videos that are coming out, and we've been doing for actually a few years now with all these different nonprofits across the country, but working with for-profits like USAA. If you haven't watched those videos yet, please go back to the YouTube page and watch them. Very powerful, and if you know somebody that could possibly benefit from this, please let them have an opportunity to watch this. And I also want to give a shout out before we close to our troops. If you're in an area where you could be in harm's way, be safe, stay alert. God bless you, and we look forward to you coming home real soon. And we'll be back with more from San Antonio, Texas with vettrip.org.